Welcome to another episode of the Inflowential podcast. I am your host, Stacy Raske, and I'm super excited for today's guest. We just had such a blast chatting, actually, before even getting started with the podcast itself, just catching up and connecting. He's definitely one of those amazing leaders with a powerful story doing big things in the world. And of course, when I met him, we instantly connected and vibe on so many topics together that I was like, you have to come on my podcast, especially because of the power of his story, which he shared in multiple books that I know we're going to talk about today. So please join me in welcoming the amazing Brian Will. Welcome,
Stacy,
Brian.
Thank you for having me. How the hell are you today?
I'm fucking amazing.
That is good to hear.
Thank you so much. So obviously we start with the introduction. So I'd love for you to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about who you are, what you do, who you serve, and how you serve them.
Oh my gosh, that's such a long story. I like to joke that I'm the most unconventionally educated person that you'll ever meet, right? I failed out of high school when I was 16, managed to graduate with a D+ average, got kicked out of the house at 18, joined the military, got off active duty, tried to get a job. I got fired from Little Caesars Pizza. I got fired as a waiter. I got fired from a construction job. Finally found my calling as a busboy at Applebee's. So that's how I launched my career. Got married to my wife, who was a waitress there. And man, we were off and running. We were a super successful power couple. So that's how life started. And then went on to start a landscaping company that I built to 7 franchises before it collapsed and failed. Learned a lot of lessons in that failure. Got into the insurance industry, built the first call center in America and for health insurance, sold it to a venture capital firm. Today it's called Connecture.com and went public. Did another one. Today it's called GetInsured.com. It was bought out by a venture capital company. Did an online marketing company that was bought by a private equity firm in 2006. Consulted for Fortune 500 companies. Wrote some books, just got into politics last year, ran for city council, got elected. And now I have taken 35 years of experience in building companies, selling them, managing and consulting. And I brought it down to this new mastermind we've launched, which is going to be from well-funded startups through 10 million. And we've got 4 strategic areas we work on, the 5 keys to success we talk about a lot. So that's what I'm doing today. And Ann, I'm on your podcast. This is a highlight of my career right here.
Oh, why? Thank you. Yeah, I know that you were waiting your whole life, your whole professional life.
You have no idea, man.
On my podcast.
Before I even knew you, I wanted to be on this podcast.
Right. It just was all just divine alignment and timing.
And I've had 3 espressos this morning. That's why I'm talking fast, just so you know.
It's why you're jacked. You had your Starbucks.
Yep.
Well, and that's the thing is like you've had such an unconventional career in entrepreneurship and obviously fellow veterans, which is always a good time to connect because there's so many veterans and so many entrepreneurs in general who just hit the wall or end up really, really struggling. And here there's people like you and myself who are these success stories of resilience and tenacity and really being able to turn all of those challenges and pitfalls and failures or whatever, whatever they are, and turn them into these powerful lessons to help us become even more successful. And you kind of hit on the highlight of, the Cliff's Notes version of your really interesting backstory and some of those key leadership lessons. And I know you share a lot of that in your books. And so I feel like leaning onto that, what you're sharing in your books, and especially the one you've got launching here soon, even though the episode will come out after your book launches. I would love for us to kind of segue into that and talk a little bit about the new book and some of those key lessons that you're sharing there.
The third book is actually, I call it the third book in the series. And so if you go back to the first one, it was all about how I got from where I started, abusive home, failing out of high school, through a little bit of the business career. Then the second book, The Dropout Multimillionaire, was all about business. And it was really designed for people who are either starting a business, want to start a business, or have a business that's not growing at the level they'd like it to. It's very much a soft skills business book. And then this third one, which is called No, The Psychology of Sales and Negotiation, is really geared towards salespeople and negotiators. Because if you're going to build a successful business, one of the things you have to be able to do is sell. You either have to sell or you have to have a sales force, and you need to train them. So this book is a lot about, again, soft skills and selling And I like to say this is not about manipulating people, and it's not about cheesy sales lines and slick talk. I hate that. It's really about understanding the psychology about the way people think, the way they react to what you're doing and what you're saying. And we call it overcoming their objections before they have the actual objection. Because if you can overcome somebody's objection before they have it, then they never have the opportunity to have the objection. Right. So this is what the book is all about. So it's really the third book in a 3-book series. And I'm really excited about this one. I think this one's going to do good.
That's exciting. I mean, everything at the end of the day, I talk about this all the time, how everything that we do really is sales.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, parenting is sales, marriage is sales. You're selling all the time, dating, all of those things. I mean, just being in relationships with people in general, everything really ends up being sales, because it is, are we able to influence the outcome? And obviously those of us who come from trauma and dysfunction, we know how it used to be manipulation and control. Mm-hmm. And now we're moving into this place of, how can I be of highest service to you by influencing the outcome? Because I know without a doubt, we can help you, kind of a situation. And I know in the early days of sales for me, in the early days of entrepreneurship in general, I think, like most of us, we mind fuck ourselves with sales, because we're like, I don't want to be salesy and smarmy, mm-hmm. and then end up really kind of not leaning into the process. We end up sort of sabotaging and avoiding some of those tough conversations, or backing down from the objections. So I love that you're pre-framing to avoid an objection to begin with. But then really looking at it as I know a story I used to tell myself was like, I'm not here to fight them. They need to be ready to lean into the journey and the process, right? They've got to be willing to do the work. I'm not here to sell you on anything. But yet I know there were a few people that we kind of had that back and forth. But because I had that mindset of not really working through or being wise enough to avoid the objections in advance, right? It was actually a disservice, because I really could have helped them get out of their own way so much sooner, mm-hmm. had I been willing to follow that process. So talk to me a bit about that. I would love to dissect that a little bit, because it sounds like that's what you're doing in this, in No.
So 2 things. First of all, you were right. Everything's about sales. You're either selling a product or service, or you're selling yourself, right? You're trying to convince somebody to either buy your product or buy your product from you. And this also applies to dating, like you said, and everything else, right? It's about selling you. So when we talk about overcoming the objections before they have it, so I'll give you a couple little things we talk about. So if you're going to be a salesperson, here's the first thing you need to understand. You're never going to have 100% close rate, ever. And so if we know we're not going to close everybody we talk to, then we shouldn't get excited about people who don't want to buy our product, because they weren't going to buy it anyway, right? I like to say, if you have a 25% close rate in business, that's pretty good. That means 75% of the people you talk to aren't going to buy from you, and you need to figure out what a no is one of our points. No. What's a no? How do you know that they said no? And if you figure out what a no is, then you can move past them and move on to the people that you can actually help, right? So that's one. Second, you need to understand the very first objection that every salesperson has. So there's one objection that every salesperson has. And the very first objection is, people don't like salespeople. They don't like salespeople because they think that, well, here's why they don't like them. The truth is, they're afraid of them. They're afraid of salespeople because of 2 reasons. People don't want to be sold anything, if that makes sense. I don't want to be sold. Don't sell me something I don't want. And I'm also afraid of the unknown. I don't know what's going to happen. You're a salesperson. You're going to do your voodoo magic on me and make me do something I don't want to do. And because I don't want to be sold, and because I don't know what's going to happen next, I'm therefore afraid of you and I don't like you. So if we have that, if we know that going in as a salesperson, the very first thing we have to do is overcome that objection. And if you can overcome that objection, you can take that wall down that's between you and the client that automatically goes up when they come and see you. If you can get that wall down, then you won't spend the next 20 minutes trying to climb over it to get to the client so that you can make the sale on whatever it is you're doing. So those are the first couple things we talk about in the book. And then we go into specifics about how to do that. And it's really all about understanding, again, human nature and the way they think, and then crafting what you say very carefully to overcome those objections, right? So I'll give you a quick one, right? So if you were coming to me, and you said, I want to by something, whatever it is, even if it's your mastermind or your services. I would say, all right, well, here's the way this process works, Stacy. I'm going to need to ask you a bunch of questions. Okay. And when I get done with that, I'm going to figure out if what I have will work for you. And if it is, then I'm going to make a recommendation. And then I'm going to let you decide if that's something you want to do. Is that fair enough?
Yeah.
And you either have to say, yes, that's fair, or no, I want you to lie to me and force me to buy something, right? So not only am I setting you at ease by telling you, I'm just going to ask you some questions, I'm going to make a recommendation and let you decide. And then I ask you if it's fair enough. That's a positive statement. And then we can move forward because you know what's about to happen. You know I'm going to ask you questions. You know I'm going to make a recommendation. And then you know that I'm going to say, okay, Stacy, is this something that would interest you? And that's how we start every sales process. It's a set at ease thing. Break down that first wall.
It's literally the pre-frame to my clarity chat. That's exactly what I do. Every time.
And every time.
Every time.
And it works.
Yeah.
And I dare salespeople to do it. It's funny.
Yeah.
When I do sales training.
I'm like, yeah, we're going to have a conversation, through asking the questions, I'll be able to, identify the gaps that I see, and then I'll make recommendations on the programs that will help you in closing those gaps quickly.
And then I'll let you decide if you want to do it or not. I mean, and then my magic statement is that fair enough?
Yeah.
And if they have to go, yeah, that's fair enough. Okay. And my wall's down. Let's roll.
Yeah. Now, the other question is also that I've tested back and forth, and I would love, this is literally turning into like sales coaching. This is fabulous. Is, is it good to say, hey, if everything makes sense, are you good to make a decision today? Or is there anything else that needs to be taken into consideration? Because sometimes, obviously when it comes to like a business owners or things like that, is there anyone else that needs to be involved in this process?
Yeah, so I break a sales process down into what we call the 4 boxes. And we talk about this in the book a lot. The first box being what we just did, which is the introduction set at ease, right? The second box is what we call the fact finding box. And this is where I'm asking you those questions we talked about. The third box is a presentation, and the fourth box is a close. So that what you just gave me was a close statement. Depending on where you put it in the conversation, I will tell you that most of your closing should be done in your fact finding phase. Because it's all about asking the right questions. And if you ask the right questions and then do what we call pause and check in, pause for effect and check back in to get a positive statement, you can get a client to actually close themselves, right? So if you're talking to me about your service or I'm talking to you about mine, I would say, hey man, let me ask you something. In your business, do you feel like it would be helpful for you if we could do some strategic planning around what you want to do? Would that help you? And your answer would be, well, yes or no. If you're talking to me, clearly it's going to be yes. All right. Well, one of the other things we do is we do a P&L analysis. We do what's called pattern recognition on a historical P&L so that I can show you what's going to happen in the future. If we could do that, would that be something that would help you? Well, yes, that's something that would help me. Okay. Well, we're also going to do in the process of this, we're going to show you how to do measured profitable growth. We grow out of profit instead of out of loss. Is that something you think would help you in your business? Well, yes, it is. And the last one is I can teach you how to build a high performance sales team so that you get a better ROI on your marketing dollars. Is that something that would work in your business as well? You've now told me, yes, this works well. Then are you ready to get this rolling? I mean, you've already answered 4 questions. Yes. You've told me everything that I'm going to work with you on will work for you. There is no close. I've closed you in the fact finding process by asking you questions. I tell people the presentation is not about presenting your product. It's not. You should have already closed them. The presentation is really about telling you how I'm going to help you do what you've already bought from me. And the close is much like you said. It's okay. Well, if all that's going to work, you want to go ahead and do this. I mean, you've already told me yes 4 times. So if you take whatever product or service you have and you build a proper script around it, and I'm very big on proper scripts because you have to say the right words with the right psychology behind it in the right way. You have to do the pause for effect. You have to do the check-ins and the positive statements. It'll just naturally flow and people will close themselves.
Wow. I love that so much because you just brought so much simplicity to the process. I think back of over the last decade in business, how many people I've worked with who are quote unquote specialized in sales, and everybody's got the magic scripts, right? Everybody's got the magic scripts for the DMs and the magic scripts in their programs. And this is how to sell. And it was so interesting how many people overcomplicate it. So overcomplicate it, or focus so much on the emotion or the sales process for the client, but never manage to do what you just did, which is tie it back to your exact product or service.
And salespeople think they have to talk.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talking about in the book is the more you talk, the less they hear.
The more they feel like they're being sold to.
Yeah, they're not listening to you after a while. And what's worse about that is, and this is an example I use a lot. So Stacy, have you ever had a conversation with somebody and they say something that confuses you? What does your brain do?
It just gets stuck.
It stops.
It stops. Right. Yeah.
They're still talking. Salesperson, Joe Salesman is still talking and your brain stopped listening because you're trying to figure out what he just said. And by the time you figure it out and re-engage with this salesman, he's already 2 minutes down the road and you're not even, now you're lost in the conversation. So now your brain's trying to catch up and now you're just in the state of confusion. It's because Joe Salesman didn't stop talking. You got to stop talking, take a pause and say, hey, Stacy, did that make sense to you right there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that made sense. Okay. And then I can go on to my next thought. Too many people just, they talk, and they talk themselves right out of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're talking instead of having a conversation.
Or are so used to having to justify. I know I went back and evaluated a sales call I did one time, and basically the client had already kind of yesed into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still so kind of tied to the process and the script that I just kind of kept going and ended up overselling and then didn't close them because I didn't capture, oh, they're in the emotion, they're yesing, they're ready to go. Cool. I don't have to explain anything else.
No. So funny. I sat on city council and our mayor pro tem called me last week and he was upset about some issue that we were going to vote on that night. And he's like, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And I said, Dan, that's fine. He goes, yeah, but. I said, Dan. He goes, am I overselling it? I'm like, yes, I already agreed with you. We don't have to discuss it anymore. I will vote with you tonight. He goes, oh, okay, thanks.
Right? Overselling. That's what it is. And I love being an example of like, look, I have made every sales mistake under the sun. So everybody has to, just do it. And we're going to suck at it until we learn how to do it better. But, following the simplicity and the clarity of your process is huge. So I would love to connect this to the leadership piece, because obviously there's a huge amount of self-leadership and self-awareness that has to happen and take place to show up in confidence and be able to hold that space for the client to feel safe, to let their guard down, and to really be able to listen. So what is the importance of that self-leadership in order to be able to lead the customer through the process and close the sale when it is the right thing to do?
I would say that I think a lot of that is understanding your product and understanding your customer, right? So one of the things I talk to I call them young entrepreneurs, not young in age, but young in business. And one of the two important points, these are two of my 5 keys of success. One of them is, why should anybody buy your product? What is it about your product that's different or unique that would make somebody want to buy it? And more importantly, why would they want to buy it from you? And that's a tough one to answer. But if you can figure that out, then you have a head start on how you're going to deal with this client. The second one is, not only why should they buy it from you, but I lost myself. Why should they buy it from you? And why is your product unique, right? Why you, why your product? If you can figure those two things out, and I'll give you an example. I had a guy in Apex called me. He's an insurance agent. And he said, hey man, I'm trying to figure out how to get past the gatekeeper so I can sell insurance policies to these companies. He said, I need a line. And I said, okay, tell me, why should I buy from you? Why is your product better? And why should I buy it from you? And he goes, well, because I give great customer service. I said, well, so what? Everybody says that. He goes, but I care about your employees more. I said, so what? Everybody says that. You walk in the door and tell you the gatekeeper those two things, they're going to laugh at you and send you home. He goes, well, what is it then? I said, I don't know. It's your product. You got to tell me why your product is better or unique. And you got to tell me why I should buy it from you. If you can figure out those two things, then when you walk into that sales situation, this is why I'm better. This is why you need to buy it. And this is why you need to buy it from me. And those are two critical points or things that you need to figure out on your own so that you walk in, you can have that confidence to make that sale.
Well, that definitely requires some of those skills around self-awareness, self-analysis, and even being willing to be honest with yourself
Ego is a
on,
big one.
yeah, right. I mean, and that's kind of bridging the gap. Like you just bridged the gap between the self-leadership and the sale and kind of that awareness piece. So what are the things that come even before that, before we're even relating it to the product, the service, the offer? What about the individual and their own self-leadership? What are some of those key things that they need to dial in before even stepping into the place of trying to say, okay, I'm learning about how I'm serving the clients or why they need to be our clients?
I mean, if we're going to talk about self-reflection, we're going to talk about who you are and who you want to be, right? As I like to say, you are who you are, and who you are got you where you are. And if you want to be someplace else, then you're going to have to change who you are. And the way to do that is through educating yourself. And I call that the books you read, the people you hang out with, the podcasts you listen to. It's the information you put in your brain. So if you want to be really good at whatever it is you're doing, you need to educate yourself and not think that you're already the best there is. And that's, again, books, people, podcasts, educate yourself, get better at being who you are and better at what you're trying to do to make yourself better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you hit on the big one, right? The ego and understanding that defensiveness or defending our ego is so huge in hiding our insecurities for so long that it's interesting going through that process of being willing to say, okay, I see you, ego. I see where you served my survival to get to this point and my success in the past. But obviously this is not going to help me get to where I want to go. So
too many business people fail because of their ego. And that's just a fact.
Right? It's the mask we wear with ourselves.
I'll give you an example. So I'm doing a little work with this organization up in Ohio that is, they call themselves a startup studio as opposed to an incubator. They've got a little nomenclature thing there, but so people come into this organization, they're funded by the state of Ohio and Ohio State University. And if you have an idea, you go in and they make you go through these 6 weeks worth of courses. And if you go through the 6 week worth of courses and you pass all of them, and then they vote you in, then you become part of their deal and they give you help and a little bit of money and this and whatever. And you would think with a 6 week vetting period that they would have a pretty high success rate. Their success rate is less than 50%. And I asked them, I said, the 50% who fail, what's the majority? What's the main reason those people fail? And the answer was ego. They get a big ego and they stop listening to us. We're all investors, VCs, entrepreneurs in residence, and somehow they get an ego and they stop listening and their businesses fail. And that's 50% of all failures in that organization. I think that's fascinating.
And yet they've not added anything to help people understand how to drop the ego to the process.
Well, that's what they're talking to me about. So
okay.
we have a call next week.
Fantastic. I love it. Well, I mean, even at the core of everything that I do in my alpha leadership experience, like the root, it's like we're creating boundaries to these systems for self, for team and relationships, and systems in our business to have these healthy boundaries and this structure in order to basically create the internal safety we need to drop our ego. That's it. I'm like, systems help you drop the ego so you can be the person you want to be.
So I had this conversation yesterday on a podcast I did, and the person asked me, so how does someone that has an ego problem figure out how to drop it and so they can move forward? And I said, well, I would do it like this. I would say, let me ask you something, Stacy. Do you want to move forward in your business?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And do you think that I could help you do that based on my background and experience?
Yes.
Okay. If I told you today that you have a little bit of an ego problem and we're going to have to work on checking that so that you can move forward, would you be open to that suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. So here's the thing. The problem is you'll say that, but your subconscious, it won't still allow you to do it. So what I'm telling you that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to make a conscious decision tell me right now, I'm going to stop thinking with my emotions and use my head and listen to what you're telling me, I will check my ego. And if I don't, you tell me. And if I tell you, you got to damn listen to me. Will you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And if you say yes, then we've at least made step one in getting this person to check that ego. Now, will they do it down the road? I don't know, but that's how I would do it. And everything I do is a series of asking you questions and getting you to give me a response.
Mm-hmm.
And then I come back and say, Stacy, remember when you told me that you were going to make a conscious decision to check your ego? You remember when you said that? Yeah. You're not doing it right now. Okay. So I need you to listen to me for 5 minutes and let me tell you what you're doing wrong here.
I love it. I love it. I love all the agreements, right? It's the simplicity of an ask and an agreement.
Yeah. And again, it's like if I talk about my 5 key points of success and I just rattle them off, you've stopped listening because I'm getting boring. But if I stop on each one and say, hey man, if I could help you build a high performance sales team, would that be something that'd be of value to your organization? And you're like, well, yeah, that would help. Okay. As opposed to boom, 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 boom. So I'm all about pause and check in.
Well, it allows it to be the tennis match. It turns into a volley, not just a fire hydrant.
Yeah. I want your brain to stop, think about what I said, agree or disagree, and then move on. And that way it's in there.
I love it. And then like what I was saying is for mine, it's that what is the process then of once they make the agreement, yes, I want to drop my ego, then what is that process of actually letting down the walls? And we've got to have those boundaries, those lanes of safety. So we're not this functional, high functioning shit show that gets us an ROI till it doesn't. Right. And so you're creating, I mean, you're literally giving all of these structure and systems, the simplicity, the consistency of this is the process. These are the agreements, and you're showing them the step by step. And it's so funny how so many people overcomplicate it.
And they overcomplicate and they talk too much because they think they have to spew nuggets of wisdom to get people to agree with them. I always use this car example, right? Here's my example. You ever been to a car lot and bought a new car? Mm-hmm. Okay, when you went on the car lot and you said, I'm interested in this car, did he hand you the owner's manual to read before you took it for a test drive? No. He said, what color? Black. Leather? Yes. Automatic? Yes. New or used? New. Let's take it for a ride, right? He gets you to fall in love with whatever it is, and then you go to see the finance manager later. Too many salespeople want to hand you the owner's manual and say, hey, man, here's the owner's manual. I need you to read this before we talk to the finance manager and shows you the 32-page contract. And when you get done with that, I'll show you how to change the oil, and then we'll take it for a drive. Sales process should be very simple. Get them to fall in love.
It's emotional. It's always emotional.
Always. Yeah.
So awesome. You have shared so many amazing tips, tools, strategies already. It's almost kind of funny to be like, oh, anything else you want to talk about?
Don't even need to read the book now. So I just gave it to you.
Oh no. I mean, you absolutely still need to read the book to get all of the nuances and the additional flair and flavor and genius that I'm sure you're sharing in the book, but we'll get to the rest of that. But if there's anything else you want to touch on, before we kind of segue to that last bit where we really talk about where they can get everything.
No, I'm good. It's been fun so far. Let's keep rolling.
Awesome. Perfect. So when I talk about leadership, I talk about influential leadership, and I describe this as the highest form of leadership because it's simply who you are being that elevates and inspires others to their greatness. So I'd love for you to describe for me, what does the highest form of leadership look like to you, or what does it mean to be influential?
I've not heard this influential term outside of you before. So give me a little more background on this before I answer that question.
That is the background. It is leadership that is, you are so embodied in who you are that being you elevates and inspires others to their greatness, their genius. You're able to influence effortlessly.
Right.
Simply and so by your presence.
And then give me the
leadership.
Give me the question. Then I got your explanation. What's the question again?
So just describing what that would look like to you. The highest form of leadership. What would that look like to you?
Gosh,
Like we're
this is
turning
a
it into
tough
a
one.
trick question.
Yeah, this is a tough. I've never thought about this before, so I got to think
Yeah.
about this one for a
Well, it's
second.
right. I mean, obviously you're dealing, everybody's in leadership in your world. I mean, you're working with leaders all the time and their businesses and organizations and sales teams and all of that stuff.
Yep.
And, you know, or even just thinking about yourself and who you are in the state that you're in, or looking at the people you admire. What would be those qualities or those things that you're like, yeah, that is an influential person where they're
Yeah,
literally transforming the world by being themselves.
and I think it gets down to a couple things here. So, first of all, it's the example you're setting for the organization, the people that you're leading, right? So, are you living what you're saying, or are you just saying it and doing something completely different? And I think that's a big one for me.
Yeah.
And then, whatever it is you're doing, is it actually influencing people to go in the correct direction, or is it, or I guess that would be it. This is a tough question for me. I got to be honest with you, Stacy.
I'm glad I stumped you.
You have stumped me on this one. I think you just have to be the best person you can be, and hopefully you're the example that you need to be for the people that you're leading. I mean, that would be my answer without having to think about that for a while.
No, and that's always the best, you know, the intuitive response. And almost every time that is exactly, everybody's on the same page, that truly the highest form of leadership is leading by example and being in integrity.
And I would like to say that I've done that my whole life, but that would be a lie. You know, that's something we strive to be better at all the time. So, and hopefully I'm better at it today than I was yesterday and 5 years ago.
Agree.
I'll tell you, when I met my first mentor, I changed my personality a fair amount from a business leadership perspective, because his name was Steve. He passed away recently, but I changed the way I operate within my company after meeting Steve and becoming partners with him. He was a very good man.
That's awesome. And that's it, right? I think the best leaders are the ones that have that humility to know that there's always opportunities to grow. There's always opportunities to be better, that we may be the leader, but it's like the best teachers are also still students.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the leading by example, that I'm willing to be in ownership of, I'm not a genius at everything. I want to attract people whose zone of genius is maybe the things I'm not the best at, that I'm willing to delegate, that it's about, you know, success is not a solo sport. And it is about finding those peers, those mentors, those team members to co-create whatever that vision is together.
And then creating an environment where everybody is participating, feels valued, and brings value to the company as well. So that's one of the things we try to do.
Yeah, and it's this beautiful blend of culture, which is given, because obviously me as the founding leader of the organization, sure, I'm creating the core values, but defining those by creating a sense of community and allowing all of the people in the organization to participate in that process. So I think it's a blend where it's not just culture or just community, because community is created where culture is given, but that when you blend the two together, now we've got some really amazing magic things happening within the team and the organization. And I think sometimes people get stuck trying to do one or the other and not both.
Yep. I believe that.
So awesome. All right. So we talked so much about your phenomenal book. I would love for you to share where people can find it and how they can connect with you online, because I am certain some people are gonna be like, oh my God, I need some Brian Will in my life.
That'd be nice. My website, brianwillmedia.com. So www.brianwillmedia.com. This last book it's coming out May 15th, I believe. But the other books are on there. My podcast, everything's on the website. So that's the easiest place to go.
Fantastic. We will absolutely make sure that we have that in the show notes and the links on all the respective platforms so people can get connected with you. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Am I the only person that's ever been stumped by that last one?
So far close. There's been a couple of people, they're like, expand on the definition. That's actually why now when I ask the question, I don't just drop, hey, what does it mean to be influential? Because not everybody knows. So that's why I've got that precursor definition now.
All right. Well, you got me on that one.
You are not the only one. You're not the only one.
No, listen, it's been a fun show. I've had a good time. Hopefully I brought some value to you and your audience. So
Oh, a ton of value.
yeah. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been an absolute blast. I can't wait to have you on again. And I'm going to read the books and then dive more in our next conversation. We'll get to talk a little bit more into the nuances and potentially whatever the next book is that you'll be working on. So can't wait to hear and learn all about it. So for those of you listening, be sure to reach out to Brian Will and check out his books. And remember, as always, you are enough. And I will see you in the next episode.